Welcome to Elevate, the masterclass where we dissect the elements of exceptional achievement and lifestyle design with a focus on personal growth and real estate investing. Now, here's your host, Tyler Chesser.
Elevate Nation, welcome back. This is Tyler Chesser. I'm so thankful to have you here, and I'm blessed and grateful to be sitting with Samantha Perkins today. Samantha is an individual who has undergone a vast transformation in her life from a habitual standpoint and really from, an identity standpoint in so many different capacities. So I'm really excited about this conversation. I know it's going to serve many of you today in some capacity. So open your mind to the possibilities today. What is it that you would love to transform about yourself? What is it that you'd love to transform about your future? Because I think the possibilities are here today. I'm excited to bring you this conversation. And I want to ask you, are you ready to take it to another level? Because today is that day. There's always another level. There's always another level for us to elevate to, for us to ascend to, and for us to also give to other people, right? There's an opportunity for us to invest in others as a result of our own transformation. And so that's what it's all about. I want to welcome you back to the show where we sit down for mind-expanding conversations with influential authorities in real estate, as well as top experts in other industries and disciplines. This is for leaders, entrepreneurs, and real estate investors who have a burning desire for the extraordinary. And man, I just love that, because the extraordinary can mean so many different things. And for what it may mean to you, maybe a little bit different than what it means to me, which is the beautiful thing about it. I think that's the amazing thing about this diverse world that we live in, is that we all have a different desire for a different type of extraordinary, and we all have the different types of greatness within us to give the greatest capacities, to our business, to our team, to our real estate portfolio, to our families. And I want to encourage you to, fight through that fear, that discomfort, that worry to, reach your own level of extraordinary. And so this is for those who have a burning desire for that. It is our mission to identify and apply how the best of the best raise the bar personally and professionally to achieve greatness in real estate and beyond. We will distill the mindset, the habits, the routines, the systems, the tools, the strategies, sometimes the struggles, right? We want to know the story beyond, where we have come to today and how we're continuing to elevate that own story. We will really, identify how we can elevate to a life without limits so that you can do the same or even more for yourself. And you're going to hear some amazing parts of Samantha's story today, which I think will really align with your future and your own transformation. This is a masterclass for leaders and those looking to achieve uncommon results and purposeful outcomes through personal growth, through real estate investing, through personal mastery, through professional mastery, other ventures, and most importantly, and ultimately in their lives. If you're enjoying Elevate, we invite you to subscribe to the show. We come out with 2 shows every single week. In fact, some weeks we have 3. So wait for that. We're going to continue to bring, amazing guests from all over the world, and, people that you may know, some household names coming up soon, and otherwise. But subscribe, give us a rating, a review. It helps us, and it also warms my heart. So if you have 15, 30 seconds, pause the show and go do that right now. But also share this with a friend or even your network. If you've listened to us before, thank you for coming back. If this is the first time you're listening, welcome. And I'd love to give you a big virtual hug. Thank you for being here. And what we're here to do is to add value to your life, to your business, to your psychology, to your fitness, to your finances, all of the above. And I hope that you enjoy Elevate, because that's what it's all about. It's about not only enjoying, but it's about identifying and applying some of the best tactics, the best strategies, the best systems that you can within your business, within your mindset, within your health set, within your heart set, your soul set, all these things. And so if you're enjoying this show, welcome back. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for reviewing. But the fee is to share this with someone else. If you want to screenshot this, if you want to share the episode, share the link to the episode link on your social media, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Facebook, Instagram. Go and do that right now, because that's the fee. It's 100% free otherwise. And, share this with your network. So otherwise, I want to encourage you to go check out elevatepod.com. Of course, check out the Elevate podcast community on Facebook. That's where you can go deeper and expand in the conversation, expand and anchor in your learning within your autonomic nervous system. So go check out Elevate podcast community. Also, I want to plug Elevate Coaching Academy, Elevate High Performance Coaching Academy is amazing. It's mind blowing. We're literally transforming lives in this 8-week program. Coach Trevor McGregor and myself have been working on this program for years, and it is officially launched. It's live, and we'd love to have the opportunity to pour into you and give you the tactics, the strategies, the shifts towards transforming your life, towards transforming your business and your performance, because it's about elevating your game. It's about allowing you and giving you the tools to make more money and have more time off, right? Have more freedom to do what you love, whether it's go skiing, whether it's go to the beach, whether it's, go travel to some new country that you've never been, right? I don't know about you, but I love traveling. And so Elevate High Performance Coaching Academy is by high performers for high performers. So go check out elevatecoachingacademy.com. Again, that's elevatecoachingacademy.com. We have a free masterclass workshop that you can go engage in, and I guarantee you're going to get massive value just from watching the free workshop. And you will get some more information on what it looks like for you to join our 8-week immersive coaching program, where you're going to get world-class coaching from Coach Trevor McGregor and myself, in addition to a mini mastermind where you have the opportunity of building relationships with high performers across the country who have a similar desire. They have a similar like-minded approach towards being the best of the best in their industry, whether they're real estate investors, whether you are an entrepreneur, a leader, whether you have a side hustle. This is for people who want to be the best of the best, and maybe who even are to a certain degree. And so it has been a huge, huge passion of ours to really create this. And I'm telling you, it is life-changing. It's a life-changing experience. So go visit elevatecoachingacademy.com. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. And we would love nothing more than the opportunity to pour into you and really give you this amazing opportunity. So again, that's elevatecoachingacademy.com, elevatecoachingacademy.com. Okay, guys, so let's dive in here because we have an amazing show today with Samantha Perkins, who is the author of Alive AF, One Anxious Mom's Journey to Becoming Alcohol Free. Samantha's memoir details her discovery of alcohol, the beliefs that shaped her own alcohol use, and how she determined drinking was no longer for her. Samantha is the founder of Alive AF and writes weekly posts tackling misconceptions of alcohol use, alcoholics, addiction, and more. This platform allows her to host wellness retreats, speak at wellness facilities, and meet with women to spread important messages regarding alcohol abuse. Samantha graduated from the University of Kentucky with a degree in psychology and spent 10 years working in mental health. In 2014, she left her career to join her husband with the family's full-time real estate investment portfolio, which there's a clue here in that whole process. And I'm looking forward to diving in to that and really bringing this whole thing full circle. It's going to be exciting. Their business includes rentals of single-family homes, multifamily properties, commercial use spaces, and short-term rentals. Samantha manages the family's 3 Airbnb properties in Mammoth Cave, Kentucky, that hosts hundreds of guests every single year. And I know that this is going to be a really, really impactful discussion. So I want to invite you to really enjoy this conversation with Samantha Perkins. Samantha, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. And, I really enjoyed our conversation we had a few weeks ago. And it just seemed to be a phenomenal, obviously your background is really interesting because I think a lot of people can align with the experiences that you've described in your memoir and just the transformation that you've undergone. So I appreciate you being, open and willing to share that, because I would imagine there's been a lot of times, throughout your journey where it's like you felt maybe embarrassed, but there's no reason for you to be embarrassed. But I just appreciate that now you're giving other people the voice to say, well, wait a minute, maybe there's something that I need to transform. So I just appreciate that about you. And, with all that said, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself because the audience doesn't know a ton about you, but tell us a little bit more about Samantha Perkins behind the bio, behind the public image. Like, who are you as a human being?
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for asking that. It's funny because when people ask me, what do you do for a living? I'm always like stammering, like, well, there's a few things actually, So yeah, I think as a person behind the scenes, I'm a mom. I am, trying to be an entrepreneur, but learning along the way. I am, very shy and introverted and, anxious most of the time. So I always I think people are surprised because I think most people have an idea that entrepreneurs are, extroverted and, love being around people. And I'm not necessarily like that. So it's hard for me to put myself out there. And like you said, sharing my story isn't always easy, but I see something way beyond myself when I do. And so it makes me feel excited to be able to talk about that. And yeah, I'm kind of in lots of different ways. I'm an author. We've got our real estate business, which just looks a lot different than, I think most 9 to 5 jobs. And so there's always something going on over here for sure.
Yeah, I love the way that you described, obviously, all those different hats that you wear, and I think that's something that a lot of people can align with too. It's like, well, when I describe myself, it's not just one thing, I'm not just one thing, and I'm multidimensional. And I think when people start to recognize that they are multidimensional, multifaceted, there's a whole world of possibilities that open up too, which is really exciting. And I love that you described it as, hey, I'm trying to be an entrepreneur, because I think a lot of times, entrepreneurs, whether they'll admit it or not, they're always trying to a certain degree, right? It's never going to be perfect. And I think that's another realization that a lot of us can find too, is that, hey, progress over perfection, right? Let's just grow and try to be 1% better today, or try to reinvent ourselves today in some way. So I think there's a lot of value in that. But I also think it's interesting that you share about your anxiety and some of the things that being an introvert and those kind of things. And obviously you're kind of stepping out of your comfort zone in some ways. But talk to me about that anxiety, because I know that that's been like a central theme as to sort of a calling card for your transformation. Perhaps at first it was a limitation, but then maybe later it became a gift for you in some way. I'm making an assumption there, so you tell me, where do you think that has come from, and talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I love that question. And you're absolutely right. I used to see it as a huge factor, kind of keeping me away from doing the things that I wanted to do. And now it's no longer that at all. Once I learned to like step into it, I was able to embrace it and, move with it. And so, yeah, I've had anxiety since I was a child. I've can remember having my first panic attack when I was in high school. And, at the time, this was kind of the mid 90s, there wasn't a lot of talk around mental health, if any, at that time. And so kind of was seeking help for a medical diagnosis, basically looking to see, I was, would have these heart palpitations and have trouble breathing. And so we thought, what could it be? And I was going to a doctor, but of course, nobody ever mentioned, could you be anxious? And, as I grew over the years, it's really just a chemical imbalance. It's not something that I can predict a lot. I mean, I can now because I've done a lot of work to be able to do that. But it is a chemical imbalance, something that happens in my body. And so it's not my fault, those kinds of things. I used to be so embarrassed of it. And now what I'm learning is, again, it's kind of it's a gift. And actually, I think of it as it is kind of the thing that pushes me forward. I think because of my anxiety, I'm super impulsive, which means I don't spend a lot of time like thinking, overthinking things, like decisions that I make, especially, investments that we make, or even with writing the book. I'm just like, you know what, I'm going to do this. And so it ends up being kind of a tool that I use now that I have it under control and know how to manage it.
That's interesting, because I could see on one side of things that, a significant amount of anxiety would make you overthink, get into analysis paralysis, like in the real estate world. It's like, well, if we do that, then X, Y, and Z could happen. So I think that's interesting that it actually has led to more of an impulsive sort of a decision making model. But I think if anybody is listening here, and most people will really, if they're being honest with themselves, they have a certain level of anxiety, right? And so the question is, are we allowing that to push us in the direction of action, or are we putting that in a position of disempowering, behaviors, or behaviors that don't serve our future self or our higher self? And so that's one of the things that obviously now you stand for, is you've looked back and said, perhaps the underlying undercurrent of the reason why I started to behave the way I did from from an alcohol consumption perspective, was due to your anxiety. And looking back, I mean, if was there a moment that you kind of looked around and said, wow, this has become a problem for me? Because I think a lot of people are like, you know what, let's just take the edge off. Like, it's kind of like, it's been a long day, like, whatever, like, it's not a big deal. It's not like I'm, an alcoholic or whatever. But was there a moment when you kind of like snapped your fingers, or you woke up and said, okay, this has become a problem?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I don't come from a family of alcoholics. There isn't a huge, line of alcoholism. And so I grew up kind of thinking, and I talk about this in the book, that you're either a drinker or you're an alcoholic.
Right.
I didn't
Right.
think there was anywhere in between. And so that was kind of paralyzing for me in some ways, because I always thought of my drinking as normal. I mean, as I drank throughout college. Sometimes I partied in college, but when I became an adult, and once we had kids, we were going out a lot less, and we started kind of drinking at home. I would just open up a couple glasses of wine with dinner. And then before you know it, that was becoming like an everyday thing. And again, because I didn't meet the criteria of alcoholic, I figured, well, this is just adulthood. I'd done all the things that I was supposed to do. I went to college, got a job, got married, had kids, bought a house, did all the things. And here I am, just going through the motions and numbing my days away with alcohol. I wasn't feeling all that happy. My anxiety was increasing. And so, yeah, I think the more my anxiety got worse, I started putting in all these self-help practices. I was reading self-help books, and I was doing all of this work on my anxiety. Still knocking back a few drinks every night, sometimes more, sometimes not, depending. But I was eliminating all these kind of toxins from my life, but no one ever mentioned maybe you should assess alcohol and its relation to mental health and anxiety. And so I started doing some research, and I found out that it's a huge factor in terms of anxiety. There's lots of research about what it does to alter your chemicals, to make your anxiety feel worse. And so once I discovered that, I was like, man, as much as I love to drink and hang out with my friends and, have a few beers every now and then, I can't keep feeling like this. Like, there's got to be more.
Yeah, and it was almost like a perpetual, sort of your anxiety led to a little bit of, and it was almost like, all right, it's not a huge problem, right? It's like you're kind of casual drinking. It's like, oh, I have a couple glasses of wine, or maybe a few beers, and it's like, you're still functioning at a high level, right? You're even talking about, hey, I'm still like exercising. I'm going out and eating the kale. I'm going out and I'm going to Whole Foods, and I'm eating the stuff, and you're taking good care of your kids, and you're excelling in your career and all these things. And I think a lot of people, there's maybe a few listeners who can say, well, maybe there is a little message here for me to just think about this, because your anxiety underneath the surface, while you're thinking, hey, this is at least kind of solving that issue for short term. And, in the big picture, it's not a big problem, because, it's not like I'm not getting other things taken care of. And, even not just getting things taken care of, but you were still excelling in many different capacities, but you were seeing that it was leading to more anxiety. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it was basically the cycle of, well, first of all, going back to that, up to an onlooker, I was, doing a great job. I'm volunteering at the kids' school. I'm taking in the baked goods. We, my husband and my business, it was excelling. We're buying more properties. We're really getting into what we are as real estate professionals. I'm exercising tons at this time and doing so many healthy things. I go back to this kale analogy, because I thought, I could just throw a bunch of kale on top of everything that was happening, and I was going to feel healed. And I was really kind of buying into this idea of like, to, hustle and, fitness and really, working on eliminating all these things. And again, we hear about this, what you should be doing to take care of yourself, but no one's ever talking about how alcohol really impacts your mental and physical health. And so, yeah, I definitely was feeling anxious because I drank too much the night before. And as a result of that anxiety, I felt like I needed to take the edge off, and then I would feel anxious the next day because I drank too much the night before, kind of going this nasty cycle. And again, like you said, I didn't get DUIs, and I didn't leave my kids at home alone, and all these stories that we're used to hearing in our culture about this rock bottom. I didn't have that from the outside, but on the inside, I felt awful. It was just a realization like this, there's got to be more than this. And the alcohol was really numbing my ability to feel anything other than blah, you know?
Mm. Yeah, and it was almost a coping mechanism to get away from that feeling of anxiety, and perhaps you started to recognize that and said, so then you said, okay, well, maybe there's something else. So talk to me about the journey from there, because obviously the first first part of the process was the awareness, and then I'm sure the journey from there was not easy, right? Because there was probably some times where it's like, well, wait a minute, this habit has been so far ingrained. This is just who I am. This is what I do. And you've even describe somewhat of the identity of your lifestyle. It's like, well, we go to beer gardens, we go to the lake, we do these things. So could you talk to me about the process from there, from that realization?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, alcohol was just what we did. I say
Right.
that it was my hobby. It was how it was there for me in times of goodness and in times of sadness. When I was happy, I wanted to celebrate with a drink. When I was sad, I wanted something to, help me not feel as sad. And so it was very much my identity. And, a lot of our friends drank and our parents and I talk about this in the book. Every single person, from the guy we buy our cheese from to the our priest, having a glass of wine and enjoying that. And so yeah, that I thought about, like, how could I ever stop? If I do, I'll just have to change everything about my life. I won't be able to go to these parties or these events. I won't be able to have dinner parties or host friends over without alcohol. And so I was really worried about losing that in my identity. And so I really started reading some books, and I found some people who had decided to kind of stop drinking in the same way that I had. And I read what they did, and I started kind of doing embracing this versus trying to hide it. And I just kind of let people know, one day at a time. I wasn't trying to focus on, okay, I'm going to be sober for the rest of my life. And so, hey, everybody, see you later. I'm out. I just kind of said, I'm not drinking right now. And I said that every minute of every day until it stuck. And I knew that it was going to happen for sure. And yeah, it wasn't easy. I just had to really focus more on what I thought about myself and what I wanted bigger than what it was in that moment. I had to push beyond, having a drink at 5 o'clock for being able to achieve much bigger goals that I had for myself and for my life.
So it was all about the small moments, right? The small decisions and sharing that with other people. I'm sure it wasn't like all in one moment and you were totally transformed, but it was all of those things that stacked up on top of each other, along with, I'm sure, some setbacks along the way, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, just little tiny small steps. And I think people think that, yeah, you're going to go from one thing to the next big thing. And that's just not how it happens. And I couldn't really even allow myself to go beyond, I'm not drinking right now. Because when I started to think about my
Mm,
cousin's wedding coming up in July and what that was going to be like, I would immediately say, I can't do this,
mm.
and I've applied that same tactic to everything that we do now, including writing the book and, getting through this pandemic with two children who don't go to school anymore, and very, very small steps, created this big success for me.
That's actually really interesting. I really like that because I had recently a gentleman who's an ultra marathon runner, and I asked him about how do you run 100 miles, and he said 50% of it is legs and 50% of it is your mind. And what he meant by that is like once you get to 60 miles, 70 miles, 80, 90, 100 miles, he's like, it's about get to that stop sign. It's not about go another mile. It's about get to that stop sign, which is like 3 steps ahead of where you are. So it's almost like you applied that same thing. It's like, this is where I'm at right now, this moment. I'm just going to try to win this moment. And then who knows what'll happen next. Am I kind of characterizing that in the correct way?
No. Yeah, absolutely. And we would go out. I remember very early on, right when I stopped drinking, we went to a birthday party. It was someone's 50th birthday, and it was a big deal. And I was so nervous about it. And I was like, how can I get through this? First of all, I was used to having the physical aspect of holding a drink in my hand all the time. So even just that
Yeah.
part of it was like, so I stopped and got something to drink so that I would have something to hold, a coffee. And then I remember the first hour of the party, I was just repeating in my head, I'm just not drinking right now. I'm just not drinking right now. And then, I would check in with myself like, oh, I'm still having fun. This is a good time. Like, why did I think I needed to have alcohol in this moment? And so I would really do a lot of inner dialogue to see, is this something that I want to be doing? Is this fun for me? Is this a part of my life that I want to continue? And if it is, that's great. And I can do it without alcohol. And if it's not, I probably need to just stop doing these types of things.
Hmm.
You know?
So talk to me, because habits are what drives our life, right? 40 to 50% of the actions we take daily are habits. And so I think that this conversation is so interesting because not only are we talking about the identity that you believed yourself to be, but also just the repetition, like even just the like holding something in your hand, I think is extremely powerful. So like what other tactics did you take to really succeed in this? I would imagine you surrounded yourself with people who supported you on this journey. Is there anything else maybe you talked to about that or otherwise that was really important for you?
Yeah, I love this. And when I am talking to people, I always tell them to take out the word drinking and apply whatever word it is that you're struggling with.
Right.
Because I think a lot of times people hear drinking, they're like, oh, I'm not an alcoholic. This doesn't apply to me. And I remind them that you do probably do a lot of bad habits that you don't realize. And a couple of the things, at first I thought that people who weren't drinking were just using the sheer willpower all the time, that they just had 5 times the amount of willpower that I had because they were able to do this and I wasn't. And I thought the same thing about people who were super fit or people who didn't eat certain things or anything that there was that I wanted to do. I assumed it was all because of willpower. So the first thing I did was learn that that's not true and that willpower is really not meant to be a long-term solution to your problems. And what really happens for people is you get into what's this decision-making fatigue. I mean, by the time you wake up in the morning and you go throughout your day, they say that by noon, most people know whether or not they're going to drink because they're not going to have the ability to think it through if they've already exhausted all of their stressors. And so for me, part of it was making sure that I didn't wake up in the same hungover state, feeling tired, eating a crappy breakfast, feeling, staying up too late the night before, not having enough energy and wherewithal to kind of get me past that 5 o'clock time. So I had to change everything about my habits, which meant going to bed a little bit earlier, eating a healthier breakfast. I put some replacement behaviors going in the morning, journaling, doing some reading from the people who I knew were going to support that. And then also at the 5 o'clock time, I wrote this in the book. I no longer went outside and sat in my chair because that chair is where I always had my drink. And I would go back to my bedroom where I didn't have a night table so that I wouldn't feel compelled to put something next to it. I at 5 o'clock would go for a run or listen to a podcast or go listen to music. I couldn't just sit in my house and expect to not want to drink while doing the same exact thing. I had to kind of change everything about my routine. And that probably sounds overwhelming to someone who's like, well, I just can't do that. But again, going back to the small steps, when you give yourself the energy by doing, one right thing at a time, you'll be able to make it through that way.
So you would go back and say, all right, one thing at a time here. Like, it's
Yeah.
like, all right, the chair is my thing this week, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you'd say?
Yeah, exactly. And, just I would come in the front door instead of the back door because when I came in the back door, we had a cooler sitting there, and just those little things to not prompt me to want to engage in that. Before, I don't know if you've read Atomic Habits, but okay.
Have.
It talks a lot about, as you know, like the predictor, and so I think just trying to eliminate some of that really helps. And then having a replacement behavior. You really need something else that you can focus on so that you're not just sitting in your chair, twiddling your thumbs, craving that thing that you're used to. It takes time to break a habit.
Yeah, I think the replacement is the most important part because at the end of the day, like your habit was a cue in your environment that triggered a need for a reward, which I
Mhm.
think is fascinating. And the fact that if you really want to get super deep on this, you can say, well, maybe there's a reward that I can get from another more empowering activity or behavior, and you can replace that. And so you talked about running or journaling or reading. It's like maybe you can get a little bit of relaxation and get out of your monkey mind that's giving you this anxiety if you're focusing on something that's productive. Is that what you found to really serve you in really replacing those behaviors?
Yes, absolutely. And at first, it's not as fun to go journal as it is to have a drink.
For sure. Yeah, right, right.
But so at first, it doesn't come from this place of like, oh, this is something I love doing, much like exercise. I've been exercising consistently for the last 10 years. but I don't wake up every day and, woohoo, I'm ready to exercise. But because I've already got it as part of it's what I do. So now I
Yeah.
don't have to think about it as much. And it was the same thing with the drinking. I had to learn a couple of new things that I could do as a replacement for drinking. And then eventually those things started to provide me with that same kind of reward that drinking would, and the things that I learned when I listened to a podcast or I would read a passage from someone and it would motivate me, or I started writing, which was a huge thing, which led to the book. And eventually once I got my chemicals back in order from not drinking anymore, then I would get that same kind of release of dopamine for doing these other pleasurable activities. But when you're drinking a lot, you're making it so that alcohol is really the only pleasurable thing.
Yeah, and it's more so like what you described as the shift towards more of a satisfaction and fulfilled life rather than like short-term pleasure. And like, of course, that takes longer to really kick in and feel those rewards from a dopamine and emotions perspective. But I think that's really interesting. And so it's basically what you're describing is it's a commitment, right? It's a commitment, it's a trust that these shifts will ultimately bring me the emotions, because we're meaning making human beings. That's what we are. Like we make meaning of everything in our environment. And so basically what you're telling us is that, hey, if there's something that you feel that you've observed in your environment that's not serving you to the greater degree of the trajectory of your life or the vision that you have for yourself, it's about committing to a process and trusting that this process ultimately will serve you in some capacity. I mean, because I would imagine through that process, like the whole time you're thinking, this is not fun. This doesn't seem like a great, a substitute for the fun activity that I could be doing. And so you just stuck with that, right? I mean, I just find that really interesting. But one thing you said earlier is that your anxiety was a gift. And I think that was a beautiful statement and something I wanted to circle back on. How have you looked at that now to be something that served you rather than something that has been like a limitation for you?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that my anxiety gives me a little bit of edge. Okay. And so I've got this edge that makes me want to, I used to hide behind and try to numb out, and maybe it was alcohol. I mean, a lot of times it was alcohol, but I could also do that easily with social media or eating or vegging out on the couch. But I've always kind of got this drive to me that kind of pushes me. And so now I kind of use that edge to explore more things and to learn about things that I'm not comfortable with. I'm already pretty uncomfortable in general, just because I have anxiety. I'm a shy, introverted person. And so rather than just getting so down about that, I'm allowing myself to kind of learn new skills. And I'm already so comfortable with being uncomfortable that it's okay for me to kind of lean into it a little bit more.
Hey guys, just a quick word from our sponsor and we'll be right back to the show. This episode of Elevate is brought to you by CF Capital, and you know how much I love real estate and how it can be a vehicle towards creating any outcome that you want in your life, which is really why we created CF Capital. It's a real estate investment firm that focuses on acquiring and operating multifamily assets that provide stable cash flow, capital appreciation, and a margin of safety for our investors, for our partners, and for the people that we serve. Our team leverages its expertise in acquisitions and management to provide investors like you with superior risk-adjusted returns while placing a premium on preserving capital. Our mission is to provide property investment and asset management solutions to help investors maximize their returns by investing in high-value multifamily communities. Our philosophy is that we can elevate communities together through this process. And I want to invite you to go check out cfcapllc.com because we have a free ebook that's called The Bottom Line, the 10 ways to increase cash flow in an apartment complex. And I want to tell you that this is a value packed ebook. So I want to invite you to go check that out right now at cfcapllc.com. I think you're going to get a ton of value just from reading this, whether you apply it to your own business or whether you educate yourself further on what it would look like if you invested with CF Capital. So go check that out at cfcapllc.com. Again, that's cfcapllc.com, and enjoy the rest of the show. I agree with that. I'm glad you went there because sometimes, and I would consider myself to be more of an extrovert, but I appreciate all the different types of personalities that are out there. But even with my personality, and I'll just give my perspective, of course I have anxiety at times, right? And there's times where it's like, oh, I have a big presentation or I'm doing a big talk or, hey, I've got a great podcast and it pushes me to prepare and to really think about how am I delivering, practice, visualize. And so I think that there's a lot of power in what you just said. Like, so everybody who's listening who has some form of anxiety, it's like, well, what's the gift in this? What's the silver lining in this? Is this pushing you towards action, or are you just worrying and then you're keeping yourself up at night? I mean, obviously there's two different facets to this. We don't want it to take us down, but if it pushes us in a direction of action, I think there's so much power in that. And the other thing too that I think about a lot, I don't know if you think about this, but I think about, like ADHD and all these other things that are out there. And it's like, well, maybe some of these conditions could be gifts, right? Maybe these personality traits could be really creating the future for this individual that would not be there if there were other mechanisms to suppress that. I don't know if you ever think about that.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a great point. And I do, I look at it, kind of in all of the walks of my life, and that, I'm going to feel anxious whether or not I'm hanging out at my house or if I'm doing this big presentation. So why not just go
Right.
and do the big presentation? And I think it's the same thing, like people with all kinds of, well, first of all, I think mental illness is a lot more prevalent than what we lead on. I mean, like you say, I think a lot of us experience anxiety and depression, and we don't talk about it enough in general as a, culture. And so I think that, just finding those gifts and finding, what are the strengths that you can take from this, will help decrease kind of any shame that people have around it, or, worry that it's going to take them down. Like you said, there's a way to find mess in it. And, maybe you need therapy and medication, all the things, and get that, but also know that this is a part of you that can be, just a treasure.
Yeah, and I think that's really really powerful, and just with your mental health background and breadth of understanding, I mean, could you talk about a little bit about your transformation now from the previous identity that you had, where you had some coping mechanisms that caused you to get out of the, searching for something to, remove yourself from the constant racing thoughts and irrational moments of panic that you've described. Could you talk about the new identity that you're continuing to form and step into, or is that something that's been conscious, or is it still forming right now?
Yeah, I think before my biggest thing was I thought I knew. I thought, okay, I have anxiety. This is how it's going to be. You know, I drink too much. This is how it's going to be. I've arrived. Basically, this is it. I just kind of like put this stop on it. Well, oh, this is how it's going to be. Too bad. This sucks, but I'll just, get through the days as mundane as they are. And, now that I realize, first of all, how wrong I was about alcohol, that I didn't have to be an alcoholic to stop drinking, and that I could live an amazingly full life without alcohol, and that all the kind of ideas and misconceptions that I had about it were wrong. So that has opened my eyes. I'm like, wow, what else am I wrong about? And so now I kind of go toward, looking at things like, could I be wrong about this? Versus, oh, I already know about that. I've heard about this kind of investment. I'm not going to do that. I've heard about this kind of, I already know what it's like to write a book. It's got to be pretty hard. I'm not going to do that. And instead, I kind of approach everything as, what could I be missing? What could I be wrong about? And how can I grow from this?
Ooh, that's good. I like that. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's been huge. And, I love now, and I say this all the time, like discovering how wrong I am about something, because I think we get kind of really stuck in thinking that we know something, and that really holds us back, and I know from my own personal experience, I knew nothing about alcohol. I knew nothing about, what I could do, the fullness that I could live with having anxiety, until I really put effort toward it. But I thought I did. I told everybody I knew, you know.
And the people that admire and respect the most in this world are the ones who they're humble, but they're also wise beyond, their means in so many different capacities, but they do update their thinking and they're always willing to challenge previous held beliefs. So I think it's really, really powerful that you say that. It's, could I be wrong about that? I mean, we could ask ourselves that question at any moment, at any time, and be empowered to, find curiosity and learn something new and grow from that. So I think that's really powerful. But is there anything substantial that you've really updated your thinking on recently that's been interesting just going through that process?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the book, I never considered myself as an author, and that I could really be able to talk about this kind of thing openly. And, I assumed that all authors had massive amount of time on their hands, and that they spent their time quietly in an office, or they wrote in coffee shops. I wrote most of this book in a tiny little chair in the corner of my house with both of my kids asking me to get them a snack every 10 minutes. And I think that, because of sobriety, I now know that it's not always what I think. And so I can accomplish these things by doing one little thing at a time. I can go for something without having all the parts figured out beforehand, which is a huge piece now. Before, I just didn't think that, unless I had, an office and ample amounts of time on my hands, there's no way I could ever write a book. Unless with our investments, unless we know exactly what every question is going to be. Again, I can't even predict what's coming toward us, today or this afternoon. And so I think just knowing that being able to, make a big change like this in your life really prepares you for other things as well.
That's so good. That's so good. And not having to have every single answer, because I'll have coaching clients or, other business partners or whatever will come to me and say, well, I just don't know how we're going to do this. And then like the word how to me is like become a 4-letter word because I don't care about how anymore. It's just a matter of let's take action and let the universe do the heavy lifting for us. Let's proceed forward. Expect that there's going to be some bumps in the road, but the more that you take action and chip away at it, the more the path becomes clear. So I think that's really amazing. And talk to me about that journey as a writer and now as an author. And how has that been for you? I mean, it's been kind of chipping away at just one little piece of inspiration at a time, or have you worked on, all right, well, I'm going to do the outline of the book, and here's the big picture, and then we'll chip away at it from there? Or how's that process worked for you?
Yeah. I've always wanted to write, and I knew that it was something deep down that was a passion of mine. And I would find myself writing in lots of different ways over the years. But again, I thought that, you can never pursue writing unless you had a background in writing, or, you went to college for writing, or, I didn't think I was allowed to do it.
Yeah.
And so writing was a huge part of my healing in terms of, when I stopped drinking. It was one of my biggest replacement behaviors, and also just something that I turned to as a support. Because making a big decision that's against what a lot of people do, it can be pretty isolating and lonely. And so I turned to kind of writing as a healing. And so I eventually thought to myself, I've got enough stuff here, maybe I can put it together in a book. And I also really wanted to give back. I think that we hear so many stories that are, again, going back to like the drinker or the rock bottom story. Everybody knows an alcoholic in their life who has, hit rock bottom, and we all know those kinds of stories, but you don't hear a lot of stories like mine, kind of those people in the middle, somewhere in between. And so I thought the best thing I could do to help people is to share about that and to tell people about it so that they could uncover their own, issues with alcohol. And so, yeah, the writing, I hired a coach just like I would for anything, because having a coach for helping you along the way is the best way to do something. And she kind of guided me chapter by chapter, and eventually I put the pieces together and was able to get the job done.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And was there anything surprising along that journey that you encountered? I mean, obviously, just discovering that you could put together a book and you could, put together something impactful, I'm sure was surprising in itself. But is there anything that was like nuggets along the way that you were surprised about? I'm just curious.
Yeah, a lot of things. It's a lot more than just sitting back and writing. First you get the parts out, and I think as I told my story, I started to discover things about it that I hadn't maybe recognized or lived through at the time. I think when you're unraveling kind of like your life story about something, or your business, or coming through some kind of trauma, you realize like maybe it's not the whole, your perspective shifts a little bit. So there were some times throughout my story where that happened. And then also just the support that I need. I thought as a writer, you're just this lonely person doing it on your own. And I needed a lot of help and reassurance, and I had to ask for help a lot because I couldn't, yeah, I didn't know exactly how to get the chapters together, or does this piece belong here, and just kind of the unknowing. And then the editing, which was also extremely difficult. And I'm not very great at attention to detail, which again goes back to the anxiety. And so this made me have to do that hard, very long detailed work that just was not as fun, So I think when I started out, I'm like, oh, writing a book, it's going to be so fun,
Right.
And there were great times, but it's also super hard. And when you do something for yourself, and I'm sure you know this, and a lot of your listeners do too, when you're in it and it's just you know, you could give up anytime and no one would probably know,
Right.
And
Right.
so just, finding and mustering enough strength to continue to push myself, even at the time that no one even knew that I was writing this book, or, for your listeners, if you're doing something new like this and you get frustrated, kind of like learning to get over that hump and to, muster up the motivation to keep going when things get tough.
Yeah, what an awesome accomplishment. And, for all the listeners who, maybe have writing a book in their future or not, I mean, there's some project or there's something that you can create that you can be really proud of, that you can overcome these challenges and you can look back and say, wow, I didn't know that I had that within me to go through that editing process and all the attention to detail that was required. And now I unlocked a new part of my potential that now I can stack on and I can expand through. And I just think that's so powerful. And one thing that you actually mentioned there that I wanted to ask you about was and I think you mentioned this in one of your blogs, but you said a shift in perception is all we ever need. And you're like freaking talking my language when you say something like that. So could you expand upon that thought and what that type of philosophy has meant for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, just in so many ways, and this goes back to when I thought that I would have to have an advanced degree in writing, for example, in order to be able to do this. It's all about really having confidence and believing in yourself. And so, I think every time in my adulthood, someone would come to me and I'd be like, oh, I could never do that. And we hear that all the time, like I could never run an ultra marathon or become sober, stop eating meat, or all of these things. And why do we say that? Probably because the whole idea just scares us to death. But I think when you kind of dig a little bit deeper and allow yourself to explore, what is it that makes me think that I'm not worthy of this or that I can't do this, and really get down to it, you can shift your perception. And, once I took the idea of I can't drink to I don't have to drink, everything changed for me. When I thought I can't drink, then I felt sorry for myself and, oh, boo hoo, everybody's having a great time and I'm not. And the party's no longer fun. And, this is not the life that I wanted to live. But when I realized, when I changed it to I don't have to drink, I'm like, whew, thank goodness I'm free from that now. Like I can
Wow.
still have a good time and I'm not going to have a hangover tomorrow and I'm not going to get too drunk and say something stupid. And so that just changed everything for me. And the same thing with writing, and, everything I approach now is kind of how can I shift this to really what I'm looking for?
That's awesome. And I'm just gonna issue a challenge right now because I think it's so powerful what you just said. I could never, like the thought I could never or I can't or whatever along those lines. When you catch yourself saying that, the listeners, and I'm gonna do this myself, I can't do that. Well, it's like, wait a minute. Okay, I just heard myself say that. What if I could? Right? What if I could? Or what if I don't have to, right? What the power of words is amazingly powerful and it can transform everything about your reality. And so, maybe it's just for the next 30 days, every time you recognize that, it's like, oh, I'm aware of that. And then from there, it's like we can make a transformation. But I love that. And a shift in perception is all we ever need is something that really stood out to me and something that I think, if people can open their minds to say, well, what if I can, right? Some people say, well, I can't write a book. I'm not detail oriented, or I'm not a good writer. I don't have a background, or I couldn't buy a 200 unit apartment complex, or I couldn't, build that business. Well, what if you could? What if you can? And so I just think that's amazing. But let's talk about real estate because I know real estate has been important for you as you've made this shift into being more of an impactful type of an individual and sharing your story. And so what role has real estate played in terms of your transformation as well?
Yeah, I wasn't very thrilled about getting into the real estate business. My husband was a realtor and a broker, and he had been buying properties while working a full time job. And I was always like, I got a degree and, I got a job, so I'm going to stick with this and, do my duty. And, my husband was super kind of entrepreneurial and really pushed me to kind of see what real estate could provide us. And so for me now, it's everything. I kind of say that I'm always working, never working situation. Like you might see me at Trader Joe's picking up groceries at 1 o'clock in the afternoon with my kids. But I'm probably getting a few phone calls, and my husband and I are going to have a meeting tonight in our pajamas at 10:30 after we get the kids down and everything's done about our next investment. And so it really has given me the space to have time when I'm not working a 9 to 5 and I'm not on someone else's schedule to, explore these things. I don't see how I could have gotten here, if I was just grinding all the time at another job and would come home exhausted, but now, it's not like I'm not stressed out or that I'm not working a lot, because I am. It's just kind of on my term. And when I do things on my terms, then I can make the space that I want for other things and time for other things. So it means a lot. And, some days I wake up and I'm not thrilled about it,
Right, of
especially when
course.
there's issues and, the stuff that I don't want to have to handle. But I think that, it's really just taught me so much. And I think too, going back to the impulsivity, it's taught me a lot about the kind of long-term gain. And so, with the sobriety, seeing it through. I know that when we buy a property, we're not going to get paid a lot on day one. Maybe we
Mhm.
do, but that would be, rare. But year 10, we might get paid a lot. And it's kind of like sitting in and having the patience to work through that. And so that's really taught me a lot as well.
So how has your strategy changed or adjusted over the past couple of years as you've transformed as an individual? And I'm sure your relationship has transformed, not only your family dynamics and all these things. I mean, how is your strategy? Because you're talking about long-term seeing it through and being patient, which are so important in real estate and obviously in life in general too. So what great lessons. But how is your strategy updated or adjusted in the real estate investing space for you guys?
Yeah, I think I'm much more service focused maybe than before. I used to say, like, what will this mean for us right now? And I find myself now saying things, what will this mean for them?
Mm.
And how can we kind of work on but everybody gaining, and that's when I think we're all at our happiest, our clients and ourselves for sure. I'm an Airbnb host, and so it's a whole different side of real estate, which I thought it was just real estate, that the guests would come, they would rent, and they would leave, just like our long-term real estate investments. But that's just not how it works. It's more hospitality management, and communication is such a huge part of it. And so I think just instead of trying to get it over with, I'm just more sitting in, settling down, waiting to see. We're not making any more knee-jerk reactions. When something goes wrong, we're not responding immediately unless we have to. And I think that the patience has really shown a lot, and just kind of playing it forward. I always say, let's just play the tape forward a couple of weeks or a couple of years. Like, what's that going to look like if we do this now? And it really helps us make decisions.
Oh, that's awesome. I like that one. And one thing you mentioned it just a bit earlier, it's about solving problems. There's always a problem. And I don't know about you, but in the moment, it's not like, oh, I can't wait to go share this with other people and help impact them. It's like, this sucks. This is awful. So is there any problems that you've had or any major challenges in the real estate business that you could serve someone else by giving them a reference point of, hey, this is overcomable, or this is something that we worked through, we were patient, and we were also thinking about decisions now and how they impact the future of not only our business but the outcomes that we're looking to create. So that's a long way of me asking you, has there been any significant challenges that you've overcome in the real estate space as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me personally, as a woman who is anxious and an introvert, I've had to learn that, first of all, it's okay to make mistakes. I didn't think that I could ever make a mistake. I thought I was already coming in at a disadvantage. And so if I make a mistake, everybody's going to think I'm the worst, and that I wasn't qualified to do this to begin with. And so I just go in now with the concept, I'm going to make mistakes. And I do. I mean, as an Airbnb host, I make mistakes all the time. Things that I thought would be detrimental to my business that really weren't such a big deal after all. Just, a miscommunication about something, or something breaks, or I'm not able to get something fixed for a guest. And, it feels awful and it feels like it's the end of the world. But, I think like I said, mistakes happen. We're human, and it's okay, and you will overcome them. And I think you have to kind of get over that they're going to happen versus how can I be perfect at this. And so that's kind of how I approach everything now, and knowing that when I let people know what my flaws are from the get-go, and I talk about what my insecurities are or what the issues are, that it's going to go a lot more smoother than if I'm trying to pretend that I have skills that I don't have, or that I'm better at something that I'm not great at. The transparency piece.
Samantha, a shift in perception is all we ever need. So it's you look at it and you say, well, okay, yeah, it's not going to be perfect, right? So that perception, it's not going to be perfect. And then so when those challenges come, it's like, oh, okay, well now I can focus on the solution, not the problem. And that's amazing. And Samantha, I've really, really enjoyed our conversation today. I want to transition into our rapid fire section. We call it the rare air questionnaire. It's all about being uncommon, right? A lot of the decisions that you've made and the transformation that you continue to step into is uncommon, obviously, and you continue to elevate your life. And I love everything that you're all about. So thank you so much for impacting me, impacting our people, and all the listeners here today. So I want to ask you a few questions. If you had to point, now that you're an author yourself, and this amazing writer on the pedestal that you thought about all these writers and authors were, I'd be curious. I mean, are there two or three of the most impactful books that you'd really point to over the past few years that you've read yourself?
Yeah. Oh, I love to read, and I'm constantly doing it. And the first book that I would say is "Quit Like a Woman." It's a book about being a female, our drinking in this culture, and the media around it. And it's just a really good informational book on alcohol, not necessarily addiction. And I think that it's been a huge help to me, and I love it. I know you read a lot of business books here, and most people talk about all the good business books, but I've also liked to read books about writers, because I want to read and see and learn from their experience. So another one is Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. It's just kind of breaking down some things about writing that I think are important for anybody who wants to be a writer.
I love that. And I'm kind of the guy who's like, I'd rather read about philosophy or a biography or a memoir or something about something that's not real estate or business related, because I get new ideas. And not only that, but I strengthen my mind. I open myself up to new perspectives. And I think that's really valuable. So I'm glad that you brought up books that are not business related or whatever. It's funny because people ask me, hey, what real estate books would you recommend for me? And it's sometimes hard for me to recommend them, because anyway, that's just not my perspective at this point in time. But
Yeah,
we will put links in the show notes of those two books, in addition to Alive AF,
thank
of
you.
course, One Anxious Mom's Journey to Becoming Alcohol Free. So we'll put that in the show notes as well, so folks can find Samantha's book. But thank you for that. Samantha, what's the biggest way, outside of what we've already talked about today? We've talked about so much, but the biggest way that you elevate your life on a daily basis?
I think consistency. One thing that I'm really good at is just when I get started on something, I just keep going at it, and I think that my husband, who was a kind of an ultra athlete at one point, he always used to say, no highs, no lows. And I think a lot of times people are searching for the highs, or they're so deep in the lows that they can't find any kind of happy medium. And I noticed with myself, if I just stay consistent at something, consistent with writing, consistent with not drinking right now, consistent with exercising, eventually it just becomes part of who I am. And so that is, I think, the biggest thing that I can tell people who are starting down any of these paths is to just, when you find something that you're good at and that you can do well, get it and get consistent with it, and it will become part of you.
That's great stuff. And you don't have to climb that mountain, all at once, right? It's
Right.
one step at a time. Or, I don't know if you've heard the philosophy also of, like, if you're going to eat the elephant, it's one bite at a time too. So that consistency, that no highs and no lows, and that's another example of a shift in perception, right? So that's really, really powerful. But what's the biggest way that you elevate others around you, Samantha?
I honestly think that sharing my story is the greatest thing that I can do. I'm not trying to get people to buy a million books, but if I can help one person relate to my truth, then I hope that that gives them the confidence and the ability to want to share their truth. And so I think that, you know, stepping into who you are and being your whole authentic self will really be the greatest gift that you can give to everybody.
There it is. Oh my goodness. Well, you absolutely impacted us today, Samantha. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being who you are. And thank you for transforming and showing us the example of what's possible for us. But are there any other parting thoughts or words of wisdom that you'd share with Elevate Nation today?
I just want to tell people that you can do it, whatever it is, you really can. And, write the book, stop drinking, start doing the thing that you've been wanting to do. Just start, you can.
Just start right now. So this is the moment. This is the call out. If you got this message, draw the line in the sand in whatever capacity you can for yourself. It is possible for you. Samantha, thank you so much. What an amazing episode. Thank you so much for taking time. But tell the listeners how they can learn more about you, find your book, and obviously we'll put links up for everything in the show notes. But if you want to share now.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, Samantha Perkins, AliveAF. I have a blog, spaliveaf.com. I talk about a lot of things aside from drinking, anxiety, motherhood. I talk about real estate, writing. So I write those weekly blog posts. You can find me there.
Yeah, of course, SP Alive AF, and that's alcohol free for the people whose minds are in the gutter.
Exactly.
Alcohol free AF. So we'll definitely put the links in the show notes of how you can find Samantha. But I encourage you to reach out to her, find her book, buy her book, read the book, and let that transform you, whether or not you have an issue with alcohol, whether or not you have an issue with habits, because stories help us create new transformation in our life. And it's always about, expanding or contracting. We're either growing or we're dying. And I think that, engaging with these type of references gives us the opportunity to grow. And so I think that's really, really powerful. But I want to encourage you to also re-listen to the show, because there's so many nuggets of wisdom here, whether it's about the perception, whether it's about the habit creation, whether it's about, mental health and, using what you previously saw as weaknesses to become your strengths. I mean, there's so many nuggets of wisdom here. So I want to encourage you to re-listen to the show, because repetition is the mother of all skill. If you truly want to understand something, or if you want to make sure that you didn't miss some of those nuggets, I want to encourage you to re-listen to the show and share this with someone else, right? Who would really value this conversation, whether it's with your network on social media or whether it's just one person. And you can tell them, hey, here are my top 3 things that I really took away from this episode. Because to me, sometimes people need to know, well, what are the reasons? What are the reasons why I should listen to this? So I want to encourage you to share your top 3 distinctions and teach those as well, because, sometimes the teacher is who learns the most. And I think that's really, really powerful. So with all that said, I want to encourage you to take massive action on what you learned today. And until next time, Samantha, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Elevate Nation, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Elevate. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and pay it forward by sharing with a friend. Most importantly, take this opportunity to elevate your results by taking immediate action on what you learned. For more, visit elevatepod.com.